Roger Williams University is hosting a crisis management seminar on May 3rd at their Providence campus. Crises, whether a natural disaster, cyber attack, or financial instability, can have severe repercussions if not handled properly. This is where crisis management plays a pivotal role. Join Roger Williams MBA students and expert speakers to learn how to prepare for the unexpected. The program is totally free and open to the public. You can register online at rwu.edu/events/crisis-management-symposium. Continuing our special report on Rhode Island's housing crisis today, an emotional conversation with the journalist Steve Ahlquist.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
The great Steve Ahlquist, Uprise Rhode Island, one of Rhode Island's most important journalists, no question about it, and somebody who, when it comes to housing and the unhoused and the housing crisis and et cetera, is really one of the leading voices out there in terms of coverage and just telling the story from an organic perspective. So thanks for hopping on this series. We appreciate it.
Oh, I'm really happy to be here. I think what I've been trying to do is to cover the story from the point of view of both the political actors who make big decisions, the advocates who work on behalf of people who are currently experiencing homelessness, and the people themselves. I've done interviews with 5 people in the last 2 weeks who were living in the encampment in Woonsocket that was bulldozed recently by Mayor Lisa Bedelli. And one of the things I learned right away talking to those 5 people, it took a little bit of time to track them down. But then when I started to talk to these people, one of the things I realized is that virtually everything the Bedelli Hunt administration was saying about the nature of that bulldozing was a lie. And I don't use that word lightly, but I can say that she had a police officer at the Woonsocket City Council meeting 2 weeks ago who said that the people at that camp, that he said that there was nobody living at that camp regularly. It was a bunch of transients coming and going, like using the tents for, let's say, heroin injections or whatever drugs they were on, and then moving on. And that there was nobody staying there regularly, and that everybody had plenty of time to get their personal property out, and on and on and on. Talking to the 5 people, that is completely untrue, right? 5 people, including 2 couples or more, lived in that camp regularly for at least 4 months, to the point where the police who came by knew their names. They would address them as, hey, by their first names, like, oh, hey, Miss Pamela, how are you? Hey, this, hey, that. And what they lost were, in various degrees, personal documentation. Like somebody lost their social security card and their birth certificate. They lost personal items. Like one person I talked to had mementos from his son who died in October, and all those mementos went away. This includes like the obituary he took out of paper. This includes a pair of his son's sneakers. This includes like pictures and photographs. All that stuff was just bulldozed away and destroyed. Another lie that was said was that there were needles everywhere and you could barely walk by there without risking stepping on a needle. And to prove this, she put pictures temporarily up on the Woonsocket site showing needles all over the ground. But if you look at the picture and you have an eye for it, and it's not even that hard to see, there's a sharps container right there that's broken open. And when I talked to people, they said, yeah, we had sharps containers up so that people weren't leaving needles. You would not find a needle on the ground. We had them, the sharps containers were outside strapped to trees. And they were full of needles, and they had more than one. And so when they went through and bulldozed, they broke open the sharps containers, and now there were needles all over the ground. And it's very obvious when you look at, and you don't have to be like, and like, here's the thing. The story the people told that I spoke to who were living in that encampment, the stories they told were consistent, not lies. They weren't making it up. They had no political axe to grind. They weren't trying to say, hey, we're hiding drug use, because they're saying, no, there were people there using drugs, right? They're not trying to hide the fact that they are, in some way on the spectrum of drug abuse or substance use or whatever it is. They are saying, yes, this is an issue. We are working on it. We need to be able to do this in a safe place. We want to live, on and on and on. So this is hard. But on Sunday morning, I learned that a person named Alan Charette died in Woonsocket, right?
Yep.
I learned it on social media. It's a little upsetting because I knew him very, very little. I've been down to Woonsocket now many, many times. And in October, the May organization does a sort of a food handout there in the early afternoon, late morning, early afternoon. And so I showed up for one of these on an extremely cold day. And I met Alan very, very briefly, but he did not really want to tell me his story. So I didn't use him in the article I am writing. But at the same time, I knew him a little bit and I'd seen him around before. So there was a picture on social media of him deceased in Social Park in Woonsocket, wearing a relatively light jacket on the bench, his head back, just died. I mean, he had medical problems, but he died of exposure that night, right? Let's face it. He had a week or so earlier gone into the emergency room because he had frostbite on his hands. I learned last night at the city council meeting in Woonsocket that Alan was days away. Well, not days, maybe weeks away. He had just interviewed for an apartment and was weeks away from actually getting into stable housing for the first time in many, many years. He was living in a storage locker. But when they found him, he was in Social Park, dead of exposure. So he is not, when I talk to people who are homeless, they tell me that in order to avoid freezing to death, they walk around all night. Right. This is like a way of, if you stop, the element's going to get you. So what they tend to do is they tend to walk around. I talked to two of the people I interviewed who were in that encampment who had their tents bulldozed by the Bedelli Hunt administration, recently got into some housing. The other three people I talked to were already in some housing. So what's happening up there is that, again, this is a problem with bulldozing encampments. People who get bulldozed or people who get evicted oftentimes get top priority, even though technically we have a coordinated entry system that judges people based on their medical conditions, their immediate needs, and everything else. So when we do things like bulldoze their encampments, we emergency shelter them, but that means we're bypassing tons of other people who may be in similar straits but aren't in an encampment that was conveniently bulldozed, right? I mean, I know I'm going on and on, so cut me
No,
off.
please, no. This is so important, and
Okay.
you are the one who's covered this better than anybody else by 1,000 miles. So,
thank
please.
you.
Yeah.
Then I'll go on a little bit. When you think about the encampment at the State House, where those people were evicted, you have to remember that there's a CES, it's coordinated entry system. It's a program that every person who provides shelter for people experiencing homelessness uses. What they do is you call this number, you say, I am experiencing homeless or I'm soon to be homeless. And they say, great, let's get your information. They type it all in. And then it's a dynamic system. And the system looks for, housing that suits you best. Now, we don't have nearly enough housing, right? There's not even close. So there are literally hundreds of people on this system waiting to be housed right now in Rhode Island. Some of them are experiencing homelessness in the sense of living in places unfit for human habitation. That's a quote, and that's actually from the stuff. Unfit for human habitation, meaning they're living outside, they're living in doorways, they're living in tents, they're living in abandoned houses, right? That means they're living in the woods somewhere, whatever it is. They're living in places that are unfit for human habitation. Some of them are couch surfing. Some of them are like staying with relatives. Some people can only stay with relatives while they're trying to keep themselves relatively straight. And then as soon as they start using, they're kicked out. There's all sorts of different ways. You can imagine the varieties of human experience. There's a million different ways to be homeless. But we're on this system. You're on CES. You're waiting for housing. The system churns through slowly. If your medical condition changes, like suddenly you're subjected to, I know a man who was subjected to frostbite. He lost his toes. And he was actually happy to tell me this happened because it moved him up the ladder for CES because he has a hard time walking now. And now he has stable housing. Because he lost his toes to frostbite, he now has stable housing. Now, think about what that is. Think about what we're saying here. But yeah, exactly. Price. But here's the thing. when we prioritize the people living in front of the State House who were not living the best of conditions and technically were living in places unfit for human habitation, we skipped everybody else on that CES list, including people who had lived there a long time. One of the comments I made early on when they were starting to talk about evicting that place, I said, why don't we move every single homeless person in Rhode Island to the front of the State House? Because they're promising they're going to get them all housed. So everybody should come from everywhere. But foreseeing this, one of the things McKee did was he positioned a state police officer or two outside the State House to prevent anybody from putting up any more tents pending the end of the court case that came, right? So they were going to basically stop anybody because they knew that is after the logic. If I'm going to get housed quickly because I happen to be here, let me go there. I would have done it, right? I was thinking,
absolutely,
right? I told people, just take an empty tent. Don't let them out, right? Whatever. But yeah, I know. Here I am talking about telling people to sneak by cops. I don't think anybody did that, but I'm just saying that, like, and I was saying it a little bit sarcastically and a little bit mean, but at the same time, this is what. So anyway, on that list, there are still people, I believe, who are on CES who would have been housed by now, who are experiencing homelessness, who are not, and I don't even know what their medical conditions are, but their medical conditions are every bad thing you can imagine, right? Alan Charette, who died, had medical issues, many medical issues, but he died on a bench in Woonsocket, in part because Woonsocket does not adequately protect people like Alan Charette. We do not adequately protect the people I spoke to, Miss Pamela, Ray, her boyfriend, Akeem, Kim. These people are being brutalized by the elements by just being ignored, by just being treated as if they don't exist. It's a heartbreaking story, very difficult to do. Literally keeps me up at night. If I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning for any reason, I sometimes have trouble getting to sleep because I know, like last night, the weather, right?
Ice cold.
After a terrible freezing rain and snow, and there are people out there hiding from this in doorways, right? Covered with blankets you would not touch without gloves. Insane, because they are filthy. People who are being, and I want to say also, I'll just go on because you're letting me go on and I can rant a little bit. The situation at the Armory, where McKee opened a warming shelter. There are a lot of issues with warming shelters that, as opposed to housing or as opposed to a bed where you can sleep overnight, right? The warming shelter is called a warming shelter in part to escape all the other definitions that put legal mandates on them. Right? That's right. A warming shelter, you can show up anytime. If they have space, you sit there and you can be warm. If you leave for more than 15 minutes, you lose your space. Right? So there's bathrooms outside. There are no bathrooms inside that place. There are bathrooms outside in the tent. And I've seen these bathrooms. If you go into that tent, you're immediately assaulted by the most horrendous odor because it's human waste inside porta-johns, inside this tent, which has heaters blowing. So if you imagine heating up porta-johns, it's a rough smell. But I've been there. I've been inside the thing, and I was there during the day, not at night. People were overnights until before even Channel 12 was on it. People were sleeping on cardboard, on the ground, on the cement. They would tell me it's not that much warmer in here than it is outside. It's warmer, yes. It's better, yes. But if you're not in a cot, you are on the ground inside the Armory on the cement ground. That place is made to hold, I don't know what the hell, army tanks or old cannons. I don't know what it's built for, right?
Right. Super tall, so the heat's going way up.
Right. You look inside, and by the way, it's a monumentally huge building. It's very, very cool inside, but these people are sitting there. And then you also think to yourself, what is way up there? What materials we use to build this? Is this really the safest, healthiest environment to be in there? I mean, while you're in there, you're thinking, asbestos maybe? I don't know. Lead? I don't know. All the different things. Maybe that's been taken care of, maybe not. But old buildings have those issues all the time, and I don't know why people should. And so anyway, beyond that, the conditions there are bad. And this is not through the fault of the National Guard. It's not through the fault of Amos House. They are managing chaos the best they can. There are good people there trying to do their best. There are people there who probably checking out and don't care. Think public education and teachers, right? There are people out there who are managing chaos. They are underfunded, understaffed, constantly fighting to do the right thing. And sometimes you just, in your brain, you just given up. And I can't blame them for that. But the weight of human suffering that's going on at the armory, that's going on elsewhere, more stuff. I was told that you can't bring more than 2 bags to the armory. Now, remember, you lose your house. Just imagine. I mean, I lose my house, and I've got behind me is all my books and all my shit, right? So I crack up absolutely the stuff I need, absolutely the stuff that means the most to me. And I'm carrying around these 4 heavy bags of bullshit. And then every day something happens to make me have to give that up. I get robbed. I have it in a tent. It gets bulldozed. I go to the armory. They say, "Oh, sorry, you can only bring in 2 bags." And those bags are searched. Those bags are gone through, right? And then when you start to add this up, somebody gives me a tent, I stay there, then somebody bulldozes my tent and all my shit is gone. This is a nonstop grinding thing. One woman said, Pamela, in fact, from the Woonsocket said, "I used to have 17 nice things. Now I have 7 after the bulldozing." That's how she counts it. She's counting down her possessions, her property, the things that make her happy or the things she needs. She's counting down as they're taken away from her by the world, little by little by little by little, and it never ends. And it's it's horrible.
It's utterly shocking. I think people know that this problem exists. I think that the State House encampment raised the scope of the issue to a more mainstream or larger audience. But right now, when with the work that you're doing and the encounters that you have, and also interacting with the public through a super popular website, UpriseRI, do you get the sense that the general public has enough understanding of the scope of these problems, and that in turn they can then put pressure on whether it's the Woonsocket mayor's office, the governor's office, whatever the case may be? Do you think people understand how severe this crisis is right now?
I think people are slowly coming around, but I even hear comments from people who should know better. Last night at the Woonsocket City Council, I forget his name, but he was one of the new city council members, and he was talking about homelessness, and it was obvious from the way he was talking about it that he did not understand what it really was. Like, I mean, yeah, we understand the idea. I don't live in a house. I live in a tent now. And that or I live in my car now. But I mean, we understand some of that, but you don't really ever think through all the implications, right? And we don't, I mean, I think unless somebody explains to you the implications, it's not something you understand. It's like, well, what is it like to be blind, right? So we think, oh, I lost my sight. And I mean, there's all these things I have to do. But do we really understand what it's like to lose your sight until we do, right? And I think there's a million different things. How do you cross the street? How do you order off a menu in a restaurant? I mean, all these different things that we just take for granted. And we think, okay, this is what it's like to be unable to see. But when you don't have a house, it's a similar type of thing. All these different things come at you, and you have to now navigate a world where when I need my driver's license, my birth certificate, I go to my filing cabinet and I just open up my personal docs folder and I pull it out, and then I bring it where I need, and I come home and I put it back in, right? I have a filing cabinet in my house to put that stuff in. If you just have to carry it with you all the time, a little folder or a backpack that if it gets stolen, you lose it. And now it's going to take you weeks or months to get all that stuff back with the help of agencies trying to process through this information. And without a car, having to go to Providence to this office or to this office to that office. This is another thing people don't understand. Many of the people I talk to who are experiencing homelessness are fully employed. They have jobs. I want to say, Mayor Badeli Hunt has on WNRI in an interview said she was arranging that for people to move to live at the armory. She had called ahead and said, "I'm going to move people so there's a bus ready to take you to the armory right now." And people turned it down. So it's like, well, I don't know why anybody who is homeless. This is something that the city councilor said last night, who obviously doesn't understand. He says, why would anybody who is homeless turn down a warm place to sleep at night? And I'm like, well, it's by bus about a 2-hour trip from Woonsocket to the armory. It's not just one bus. There's not a bus that runs from Woonsocket to the Armory every day, right? This is at least 2 buses. This person, this one man I know, has a job in Woonsocket in a restaurant, and he works there. When he gets out of work at 11, tell me what bus you take to get to Providence at 11 a.m. When he gets a bus out of work at 1 a.m. because it's a weekend night, tell me what, because he's just cleaned up all the grills and all the other shit he do in the restaurant. How does he get from there to Providence to sleep? And by the way, most shelters don't let you in past 8 o'clock. They have cutoff times, right? So if you make special arrangements, they'll say, okay, you're working, you have a note from your boss. Oh, boss, can I have a note so I can go to my shelter? Think about where that puts you. That boss is thinking, oh, this is a guy I want to promote, because all the shame and all the stuff we put on homelessness as a result of this, your boss is thinking, is this the person? Well, I'm going to promote the 16-year-old kid who lives at his house and over this guy who's 30 years old and lives in a tent or has to live in a shelter in Providence. Yeah. If he goes to this shelter, he will lose his job. Guaranteed. He will not be able to get back and forth. His girlfriend's doctors are all in Woonsocket. She's being treated out of Thundermist. How does she get? And she needs foot surgery. How does she get from the Armory to her appointments and then back? And then remember, at the Armory, if you're gone for 15 minutes, you lose your bed. You have to reapply. You have to re-go in. So it's more than 15 minutes to go to Woonsocket by bus, go to an appointment, or have foot surgery or whatever else is happening. I mean, just add it all up. People do not get it. They just do not understand that in our lives, it's a pain in the ass for me to make it to a doctor's appointment. And I have a car and a house and all the other shit, right? I've got health source and all this other stuff. I just go to the doctor when I need to. I hate it, but I go. For other people, it's a gigantic chore, and not going means death. I skip a doctor's appointment, I'll probably be okay. My high blood pressure was not going to kill me tomorrow. It's going to kill these people to be there. And in fact, Alan Charette is a great example. And he's not the first person to die in Rhode Island or even in Woonsocket this year. I think he's number 3 in Woonsocket and something like 13 or 14 in Rhode Island, but it could be more.
Right, because those numbers are. Oh, please, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, one more thing. There's a woman who died, and they found her body at the airport.
Yes.
I don't know if you heard about this, right?
Of course, yeah.
She was identified. I'm not sure she was homeless, but I'm pretty sure she was homeless. When I asked the advocates, they said to me she had never made contact with them in any official way, as far as I can tell. And that's the other thing about homelessness. Not everybody reaches out to an advocate. Not everybody knows what to do when they're homelessness. There's a stigma that goes to this that prevents people from doing what they should be doing or what they need to do to get the help they need. And so when she died in the woods near the airport, alone, cold, who knows what kind of medical issues, she died. Because social services failed her, but because she did not even know the beginnings of how to ask for that. If you were homeless tomorrow, what's the number for CES? Where do you look that up? Who do you call? Right? Most people don't know this stuff. It would take you a phone call or two. If you call the cops, I think the cops would say, I don't know, just look it up, find, so you got to go to a library when it's open. Got to poke through, oh, here's this housing group. Let me call them. Oh, no, they'll give you a number. So you call that number. By the time you're done, you're on the phone for 2-3 hours. And then they say, we'll put you on a waiting list. We'll see you in a year, a month.
Right.
I mean, so what did you get out of all that work? Nothing. What did she got? She got to die in Warwick, unknown, alone, and cold. That's what's happening. Some people, if you're lucky enough to make it to the next night, you might not be so lucky. So Alan Charette made it through many, many nights alone in the cold. And then one night he got unlucky and he died. And that's how this ends for many, many people. And it's anger-inducing, and it makes me want to throw punches. Last night, I couldn't help it. I got up and I spoke at the Woonsocket City Council meeting because the mayor, during the public speaking, rose and spoke to address some of the fabrications in the room and then began to say whatever she said. And that just spurred me to get up and say, let's talk about, she said, fabricated stories bring dark clouds or something like that. And I got up, I said, let's talk about some fabricated stories and dark clouds. And I directly went after 2 of the lies that she said in recent months. recent weeks, I could have gone on for 7, 10, 12, 15 items of direct lies her administration has said about the situation in Woonsocket. I could go on, and that's what my reporting's been about. It's been, it just never ends. It's just terrible. All right.
Well, that was such an important and intense and sobering, essentially, presentation from your subconscious that you just delivered, that I just want to leave it there, because I want people to just take all that in. They should visit your website, UpriseRI, if they don't already. We definitely have a lot of overlapping people, but there's also a lot of people out there that maybe you haven't visited Uprise, and you should immediately support it. And, it's, I mean, there's so much to follow up on just from that conversation. And, but more than anything, just to pause and think about and go, if you don't understand the scope of this issue and the transportation questions, the logistics questions, the ignorance questions, the life and death facts that are on the table right now here in Rhode Island, that can't be packaged into a short little news story or, celebrated with a press release or anything like that, then it's time to pay attention. Because in this series this week, we're talking about all levels of housing, quote unquote. The unhoused, we're talking about low income housing, we're talking about quote unquote middle class housing, the housing stock as a whole. And fundamentally, the foundation for this conversation starts with what you just presented today, Steve. So I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. Thank you for having me on. This has been great. And thank you for letting me vent, because I don't get a chance to really emotionally confront these all the time. And I'm feeling a little bit emotional right now. So it's a good feeling to get that out. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. The legalization of recreational cannabis that went into effect last year can open doors for your career. If you are already in the industry or wondering what is the best path to break into the cannabis field, well, the University of Rhode Island has a program to help you become highly competitive in numerous areas of the cannabis industry. Fully accredited by URI's College of Pharmacy, the certificate program is 100% online, and it can be completed in 2 semesters. The next application deadline for the summer 2023 session is April 4th, and courses start on May 9th. You can learn more at uri.edu/online/cannabis, or give them a call at 401-874-5280.
At HealthSourceRI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.